surprise or shock to you when I say that I'm a Conservative Member of Parliament. My party does not support the mansion tax, and I most certainly would not support a mansion tax. As far as I can see, the introduction of a mansion tax here in the UK would be a major new departure as a tax. It would be a tax on homes, not for local services, which is what a council tax broadly delivers, but it would be for national revenue. It would actually be well on the way to a wealth tax, in my view, such as they have in France, because I suspect that once you're tempted to start looking at the value of parts of somebody's property, it may not be long before, as in France, you start looking at other bits of their property that they own to see whether that might yield an annual tax as well. The mere word mansion, I think, is the giveaway. I don't think any of us are under any illusion that a very large number of the properties that would be within the sites of this tax would not be described as mansions, especially by illustrious estate agents such as yourselves. We all know what we mean by a mansion. It's largely a big old building that's lived in by aristocrats, with lots of land attached to it. I think that's what we normally call a mansion. These are often straightforward family homes which have happened to accrue added value simply because they sit in a certain place where things may have happened over the years while that house has sat on that particular plot of land. And that is nothing to do with anything that the actual owner has actually done. Of course, the excuse that we're now hearing from some of our opponents, particularly the Labour Party, is that the reason why they are supporting a mansion tax, other than the fact they need to gather in more tax revenue, is because this would be a way of preventing the wealthy from taking their wealth abroad with them. And they say, this is a great problem, that because capital can now flow around freely come into the country, freely leave the country, there are no controls the way they used to be, that they have this fear that people shift their wealth out of the country if they so choose. And this would be a way of ensuring that not all their wealth can be removed from the country, because as they proudly say in the chamber, they can't carry their houses with them. But surely, of course, that's probably my point, this isn't just going to hit the wealthy. And this is, I think, one of the really deceitful things about this tax, and again, the fact that it's called a mansion tax, this implication that it's only going to hit very rich, prosperous people. I mean, it will hit them, of course. But really, I think that the concern has to be, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, that there are an awful lot of people who have lived in their houses. They've often bought a house in an area for really quite a small sum of money, and then because, let's take something like Crossrail arrives, and that suddenly pushes up the value of the property. But it doesn't mean that the person living in the property is wealthy, in themselves. It's, I think, known as being asset rich but cash poor. And we know there are going to be a lot, particularly of elderly people who may have lived in properties for, decades, are going to be the ones that are going to be most worried and most hit by this particular threat to them. The politics are that this was originally, as is rightly pointed out, a Liberal Democrat policy, proudly nurtured by Vince Cable, and taken up with alacrity by Ed Balls more recently on behalf of the Labour Party. Surprise, surprise. Actually, at the same time as Labour has picked up on this particular way of raising money, funny enough, the Liberal Democrats appear to have slightly lost their nerve and have now moved on to talking about increasing the number of council tax bands that would somehow also be a way of taxing higher value properties. I think there's some problems with that, not least because I think it would again complicate the relationship between council tax and what it's supposed to pay for, which is of course local services, because the whole point about this particular tax is it's meant to be raising money for the national treasury, not for local councils where the houses sit, unless of course the argument would be that it would enable central government to give no further central government grants in return for having this massive opportunity to tax a lot of houses, put into into higher tax bands. I think the other problem is with increasing council tax bands, which in itself has some logic to it, because of course we haven't actually had a revaluation of properties since 1991, I think it is. And And I think if you were going to increase council tax bands, you'd almost certainly have to have hand in hand with that a revaluation of property. Now, I can tell you it will take a very brave political party that suggests a revaluation, given that there hasn't been one for so long, because I think particularly in a place like London, the impact on literally millions of people and the houses they own would be absolutely horrendous. So we may have to look at whether there's some way of bringing things into modern reality, but I suggest a revaluation based on massive hikes in council tax is not something a political party is going to brave unless they have an absolutely stonking great political majority. And I don't think any of us think that that is very likely. We're hoping to get a Conservative majority, but it certainly isn't going to be the size that I think would allow you to feel safe to do something as radical as that. We are, the Conservatives, the only party which is resolutely opposed to this kind of tax on people's homes. Now, we've had reference to the stamp duty changes, which the Chancellor has brought in over a period of time, and last year we had the big announcement on a much bigger hike in stamp duty, although it was quite cleverly nuanced, so that I think that £937,000 is kind of the tipping point. Below that sum of money, anyone selling a house will be probably around the same or slightly better off. But once you start going above that, there is going to be an impact, a cost. And I'm not somebody who would go into politics to whack up taxes at all, let alone on people's property. So, you know, it doesn't make me happy. But I can see that the point that the Chancellor would make is that it is at least only a one-off payment when you sell a property rather than an annual tax. I suppose, in a sense, it was an attempt, in political terms, to shoot Labour's fox by saying, yes, we also recognise that we can bring in more revenue through the whole sort of process of property, but what we're very uneasy about doing, or very opposed to doing, would be to simply say, let's apply what is effectively a wealth tax every year on your home. So, I think the other big question we need to ask is, okay, at the moment it's going to be levied at houses, properties on 2 million plus, but I'm not sure that any of us really believe that that's where it would stay. And that is a big unknown, but it's definitely must be a big concern. Because, let's look at it this way, certainly the Scots will not be voting for it well, what I mean is they'll be wanting to have their say, and they will certainly want to keep it going, even if it means lowering it, because I don't know whether you read, but already the Labour leader in Scotland has told the Scots, but that is Jim Murphy I'm talking about, has told the Scots, isn't it fantastic, there's going to be a massive new tax levied on properties in London and the South East, and it's going to pay for lots of Scottish nurses. So, as far as Scotland's concerned, the tax that's going to be largely raised in London South East is actually going to be financing improvements in the health service in Scotland. So, knowing that the Scots are looking to have an ever bigger say on what actually happens across the UK, even while they try to peel themselves off, I'm sure they will be very happy to maintain the mansion tax, but if necessary, given the demands financially they want to make, they'll be looking to extend it. And that means, of course, the property is lower than £2 million. And let's also remember that I think that kind of rough estimates are somewhere between affecting 97,000 properties and around 110. So let's say 100,000 properties. The Labour Party is saying that this tax on 100,000 odd properties, don't forget again, largely in London and the South East, is going to be capable of raising £1.2 billion. Well, I think that's quite some push, actually. But I think somebody's worked out that if that is what is absolutely what they have in mind, then I think that roughly works out at about £12,000 per property. Now, they have already said that they want to start off slowly. So they're actually proposing, I think, more like a £3,000 annual charge on properties at the 2 million mark. Well, it doesn't, you know, I'm not a great mathematician, but you can work out if that's what they're going to do, then the climb for the bigger properties is going to be very precipitous indeed if they are going to get to their 1.2 I think that's what leads me to believe that it won't be long before they're looking at houses of 1.5 million and upwards. And, you know, Vince Cable did once upon a time suggest £1 million. And I think people with properties worth £1 million and over, and there are considerably more of those, ought to be feeling just slightly concerned that it won't be long before the eye falls on those properties as well. Because that's, I think, the only way they're going to actually easily get to the target of 1.2 billion. And who's to stay at 1.2 billion? I mean, once it becomes a revenue raiser, well, I mean, you know, why not just expand it for other general revenue as well? And the unfairness is going to be that this is what again makes it such an unusual situation, that one part of the country is actually going to be asked to make the entire contribution to the increases needed to pay for X, Y, and Z, and that's what I think also makes it very unfair. I locally have surveyed. We sent a survey out to all the streets in Ealing Central Acton constituency with an average, where houses had an average value of £1.2 million and upwards. And I think we ended up finding ourselves sending out about 1,700 of those letters, maybe 1,500. We had a staggeringly strong response. I mean, we got something like a 10%, 12% response rate, which is, I think any marketing agency will tell you, is actually huge. And of those responses, about 95% were adamantly opposed to the mansion tax. And the great thing is there are very strict rules in Parliament about what MPs can spend parliamentary funding on in terms of communications with their constituents, particularly if it's on anything which is actually overtly political. And the great thing is that if somebody has communicated back with you on an issue and expressed a political preference, or at least a preference on an issue, I'm entitled in that to write back to those people and make some political remarks. So I have to tell you that I've been writing literally hundreds of letters to people about this issue. I tell you my sense of the state of play as far as the politics are concerned in my constituency. I would be lying if I didn't tell you that there is quite a large part of my constituency that probably thinks it's quite a good thing, this tax. They don't live in houses that are approaching those kind of values, and they believe that it would be valuable additional revenue. So I would pretty much say that the majority, not by a huge amount, but a majority are probably actually either in favour or at least unmoved by the introduction of this tax. But here's the important catch in that. I think that for people who just think, oh, yes, as far as I'm concerned, it's fine, it's a good idea. It's not a vote changer. It's not a game changer. But I think for those people who seriously are opposed to it, who feel concerned about it, it actually is a vote changer. And I have had people from other political parties saying, you know, gosh, they're chasing me off to my house now, and that is it. So I will not be supporting those two parties again. So, you know, that is why I feel on principle anyway that I would have opposed this move to starting to tax wealth in this form of people's homes, which I find pretty offensive. But at the same time also, I am content in my political stance because I think that for those people who really care about it, it is a vote changer. And I think therefore I'm on the right side of that particular argument in terms of a marginal seat, which of course we always have to be very concerned about. It is very marginal, this seat. But anyway, I think so my basic view is with Liberal Democrats you'll get probably a proposal for council tax bands to be higher and wider slightly. With Labour Party you almost definitely get a mansion tax. If there's a coalition between those two parties you would almost certainly get a bit of both. And my biggest concern will be that once you've got it, you're never going to get rid of it again. It'll only just be widened and widened to become ever more able to raise even more revenue. And so it's only with our party, frankly, that we've got a chance of, you know, killing a stone dead, and we will do so. There are no plans for mansion tax for the Conservatives. Thank you very much.